What if I could share with you the worst day of my professional life, without fear of judgment or ridicule, and without loss of respect? Could we learn together from my experience?
CaseMatters, a podcast series created for Australian dental practitioners, intends to do just that. To create a shared experience where all points of view are explored to help empower safer practice. Hello, my name's Dr. Annalene Weston, Dental Legal Consultant at Dental Protection, and I'm going to guide you through today's case entitled, "I Thought She Knew What She Was Doing." Many parties became involved in this matter and everyone had an opinion. But which view was correct? All of them or just some of them? And is there such a thing as the right point of view in this at all? Or could it simply be that everyone's a little bit right and a little bit wrong? We'll hear from the people involved and also look at the final outcome to see what lessons can be learned. Now I'm going to hand over to my colleague and fellow dental legal consultant, Dr. Roger Dennett, to walk us through this matter.
Thank you, Annalene. As you know, our patients believe us to be expert in what we do, and they rely on our clinical recommendations and treatment plan. But sometimes treatment can go wrong. And when that happens, our patients may lose trust in us. So let's dive into the specifics of the matter. Miss Lottie presented to Dr. Young seeking cosmetic treatment to address her congenitally missing upper lateral incisor. Her contralateral right incisor was a peg lateral. There were considerable discrepancies in tooth width and asymmetry in Miss Lottie's smile. In essence, some treatment options were discussed, and Miss Lottie consented to have porcelain veneers placed on the upper right lateral and the left canine, along with some minor gum surgery. Okay, so far, so good. Let's now hear from Miss Lottie.
I've always had a fear of dentists. It started when my mum took me to the dentist when I had a sore tooth when I was about 9 years old. I remember it like it was yesterday. The dentist took out my tooth and it really hurt a lot. Every time I go to the dentist, I think about that appointment. Things have changed in today's dentistry, I know, but my mind replays that horrible experience each time I go to the dentist. I wish I could get some help with that.
Many of us have had experience with patients who report such feelings, not only at the initial appointment, but repeatedly, time and time again.
I found Dr. Young through an online search for cosmetic dentists near my home. I liked the website, which showed some treatment before and after cases, which I thought were impressive. Although I had no knowledge of Dr. Young via friends or word of mouth, the practice and Dr. Young seemed to have some really great Google reviews. So I booked an appointment to see what I could have done.
Let's now hear from Dr. Young, a dentist with 3 years' experience.
Miss Lottie had experienced difficult and unsatisfactory dental visits over the years, which she puts down to childhood dental trauma, as she called it. I explored the beginnings of this with her, and it all apparently centred on one unsatisfactory visit to do with a deciduous tooth extraction. She felt that it had been difficult to dismiss and had constant reminders every time she visited the dentist. Anyway, when she first came to see me, she was rather quiet. Actually, she was very quiet. But I took time to get to know her and listen to her past experiences. I sensed that we were building some rapport. She told me she was hoping to have some cosmetic treatment to assess a gap on her upper left side. Upon examination, I noted that she had a congenitally missing upper left lateral incisor. Her contralateral upper right lateral incisor was a peg lateral, and there was considerable discrepancies in the tooth width and its symmetry in her smile. Miss Lottie said that her funds were limited, but she'd hoped that cosmetic improvement was possible within her limited budget. So I outlined all of the treatment options to her.
Dr. Young told me that I could get a great result with simply putting on some porcelain veneers on my upper right pointy tooth and my upper left eye tooth, along with some minor gum surgery. The mention of gum surgery worried me a little bit, I have to admit, but Dr. Young said that it was going to be a piece of cake. I didn't really know what a porcelain veneer even was, although I had seen some reels of influencers on Instagram who had got them, and they seemed really pleased with them. You know, Dr. Young was very enthusiastic about how much I'd like my new smile, so I thought these stick-on veneers were permanent, and it all sounded so simple, and Dr. Young seemed like an expert. What could go wrong, I thought.
I presented my findings and recommendations to Miss Lottie. I provided her with written information about porcelain veneers and drew some diagrams for her. I was confident that hers was a simple case and that I could meet her expectations. The gum surgery was very minor and would have improved the symmetry of her gingival architecture, and she seemed satisfied with my explanation of everything and accepted the quote from our practice coordinator, who ran through the treatment with her. I wasn't expecting any problems, none at all.
During the treatment, quite unexpectedly, the patient requested that her upper right central be adjusted.
I had to go to the toilet mid-treatment and looked at my teeth in the mirror. I could see that my front tooth was longer than the other. So when I went back to the room, I asked Dr. Young if that tooth could be made a little bit smaller. She answered, yep, no problem. So I trusted her. She adjusted the tooth and showed me in the mirror. Oh my goodness, I was shocked. And I have to say that she hadn't shortened the longer tooth, but she'd made it even narrower, really narrow, which wasn't what I wanted at all.
Let's see what was going through Dr. Young's mind.
I thought she was wanting the tooth adjusted widthwise to make more space for the lateral veneer. With the benefit of hindsight, I could see this would have been beneficial, although I hadn't discussed with her at the time of the initial treatment plan. And so I proceeded to do as she asked to get the proportions right. When I realised that I'd misunderstood her requests, I was so annoyed with myself. I felt the best way forward was to extend the upper central with some composite resin, which I did, but in dealing with this unexpected event, I no longer had time to take the impressions for the upper right lateral and the upper left canine, both of which had been prepared for porcelain veneers, so I asked her to come back for this.
My mum called that evening and I told her how I was feeling. She told me that the dentist should have known what they were doing and not made any mistakes. So I asked my mum if she'd come to my next appointment, for some moral support. So my mum came along somewhat reluctantly. But I probably shouldn't tell you this, but she had an argument with Dr. Young, and do you know what she said? She said that her son was a solicitor and that due to Dr. Young's mistake, all of the treatment should now be free. Mum said that if she didn't get away, she would take legal action and try to ruin Dr. Young's reputation. I was embarrassed, so embarrassed. I know my mum's looking out for me, but she went too far. My brother isn't even a solicitor. She just made it up to sound more impressive.
Let's now hear from Dr. Young.
I had reorganised the treatment visits as I needed to take another impression for the 2 porcelain veneers. Miss Lottie showed up with her mum, who had a bark like a Rottweiler. She told me what a big wig her son was and that if I didn't waive my fees for this job, she would ensure that my reputation would be ruined and that the matter would be placed before the courts. I felt this was an extreme overreaction, as I knew that I was going to be able to deliver a satisfactory outcome for my patient. For that reason, I wasn't feeling like I should waive my fees for the work. I mean, would you? I have debts after all. I convinced them to return and see how the veneers looked and took the impression. Everything seemed fine when they calmed down, and ultimately it's between me and Miss Lottie, not her Rottweiler of a mother. I didn't really worry much about it, to be honest.
Well, the day of cementation came around, and again, Miss Lottie did not attend alone.
On the day of the porcelain cementation, again Miss Lottie's mother ushered her daughter into the treatment room and almost immediately took control of the whole show. I tried to ignore the mother, showing the patient the porcelain veneers on the 2 teeth and using a try-in paste. Miss Lottie was happy, and so I began to clean and prepare the teeth for cementation. It was at this point that the mother went on and on about the treatment had to be free, otherwise I was going to be sued, and she became personally abusive towards me. It was nasty. I felt suddenly very uncomfortable about finalising what had been a simple treatment case. It was at this point I cracked, I admit it. I sat up Miss Lottie in the chair and handed her the 2 veneers. I told her that I could not continue to treat her under this duress. I would waive my fees, although she would still have to cover the lab costs, and she would need to see another dentist who could cement the veneers on for her, and I left the room. And as I did, Miss Lottie's mother was open-mouthed and for that moment, strangely quiet, as was Miss Lottie. It felt quite satisfying.
I was dumbstruck. I felt abandoned, confused and helpless. I was a victim of a disagreement between my mother and Dr. Young. I found myself not wanting to speak to my mum anymore, to be honest. She really embarrassed me. And look where it's got me, her attitude anyway. I now have to go to a new dentist who I didn't know and have them cement 2 veneers for me. And while Dr. Young has waived her fee, she hasn't really done me any favours. I still have to pay the lab fee and the clinic costs. And Dr. Young only gets paid a percentage of that after the lab has been paid. So basically, I have to pay for the whole thing. And then I'm going to have to pay extra to have another dentist. cement them as well. It was really hard to find someone who'd do it, but I did in the end. However, he didn't seem at all happy with the job that I'd been given. I pleaded with him because I couldn't afford to pay again, and he glued them in anyway and charged me a pretty penny too. Then a couple of months later, the veneers discoloured and no longer looked any good. I felt terrible. It's all been a bit of a disaster, really. I thought she knew what she was doing, this so-called Dr. Young. Clearly didn't, though. And the other dentist seemed really sceptical of her work.
Well, I guess that we can all imagine what happened next. Subsequently, Dr. Young received a letter from the regulator seeking copy of the records in a response to the complaint made by Miss Lottie. Dr. Young was asked to produce a copy of her records and a written submission setting out her version of events. Naturally, Dental Protection assisted her with her submission. Each state and territory has a unique regulator, so in CaseMatters, we use the catch-all phrase of APRA to describe them. Let's hear from the APRA case officer.
On review of the matter, it is clear that Miss Lottie had been happy with the original proposed treatment plan, which was presented very professionally and in a way that indicated the treatment was routine for Dr. Young. Miss Lottie, however, felt that Dr. Young was in control and would deliver the expected outcome. Dr. Young was indeed in scope, and her records reflect that reasonable treatment alternatives were given, as were the risks and warnings, and therefore she had consented to the veneers. However, it is clear that Miss Lottie's expectations of a good outcome were not realised, and certainly while APRA acknowledged that dental practitioners do at times need to modify their plan partway through treatment, the unplanned and undiscussed adjustment of the central incisor does appear to have been without Miss Lottie's consent. Further, APRA noted Dr. Young has not met her obligations in regards to the Code of Conduct, as she did not appropriately hand over or refer Miss Lottie to ensure the continuity of her care. For this reason, APRA issued a caution to Dr. Young, as breaching the Code of Conduct constitutes unsatisfactory professional conduct.
As you have heard, APRA was critical of Dr. Young for changing the treatment plan on the run. They also expressed criticism that she had abandoned the patient when so close to what could have been a successful completion of the case. Let's hear now from Miss Lottie and Dr. Young.
Well, that was a waste of time. A caution isn't going to pay my bills or get my veneers redone. I need to find an avenue that I can get some money from and go down that. I won't be deterred. This is now a matter of principle for me. It's quite clear that all the dentists have stuck together. I wish I did have a brother who was a lawyer now.
I'm devastated. I never want to have to go through something with APRA again. It took ages to get the paperwork right, and I worried about it every single day. At least it's all done, and I never have to hear from her again. At least one positive thing I've learnt from this is I learnt the hard way that I really need to hand over or refer my patients to someone else if I'm unable to finish their treatment, which is in line with our Code of Conduct.
Sadly, that did not prove to be the case, as Miss Lottie proceeded to make a compensation claim against Dr. Young for the failed veneers. Ultimately, Dental Protection stepped in to assist Dr. Young in resolving the matter, but it was many months before resolution could be reached. The take-home messages are clear. Any change to the treatment plan mid-treatment should be thoroughly discussed with the patient before proceeding. And it is never a good idea to abandon the patient in the midst of treatment, especially in an aesthetic case. Finally, we do have to question the thought process of the practitioner who cemented in work that they did not think was of an acceptable standard. As they were not part of Miss Lottie's original complaint to APRA, we cannot know how APRA viewed this. We can, however, extrapolate from previous cases, and we believe that this practitioner would have been subject to an equal amount of criticism as Dr. Young for proceeding to cement treatment that they did not believe was of an acceptable standard. So, always remember, the hands in the mouth own the work.
They do indeed. Thank you, Roger. And thanks for working through that case with us. And of course, thank you all for listening. We do hope this content was helpful to you, and we look forward to sharing more guidance with you in the future. Perhaps there are some situations similar to this that have occurred in your own practice. We'd love to hear from you if that's the case, so please do let us know. If you like Dental Protection podcasts and you'd like to hear more, please subscribe and leave a review.